Well, hello and welcome to the latest in our series of Choice Words videos, where we get to chat to some of the country's leading fund researchers and fund selectors and find out what makes them tick. I'm Julian Marr, I'm Editorial Director of Wealthwise Media, and today I'm delighted to be talking to the Chief Research and Investment Officer of Morningstar, Dan Kemp. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Julian. It's good to see you.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you very much. I'm glad I got that right around. So that's good. Now, what I have learned from the first batch of Choice Words videos we filmed is that my intros need to be shorter. So, Dan, let's jump straight into it. Yeah, that was it. That was it. There we go. Or maybe they should just be edited straight out. But we don't need to do that now. I can just go straight into it. And if anyone wants to find out why we're doing them, they can just read the articles later and when they click on. So then, straight into the investment chat. What excites you about the current investment outlook, and what worries you, if anything?
Well, of course. Well, the great thing about investment, what keeps me interested day after day for 30 years, is that there's always something that's really interesting and exciting, and there's always risks on the other side. And as we look at the markets at the moment, I think one of the things that we're seeing is this huge disparity in expected returns from different asset classes. So people will be thinking about US markets leading the world over the last couple of years, and within that, a small group of large cap, technology-driven companies have been doing very well.
So I hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But other parts of the US market have really lagged behind. Other markets outside the US have lagged behind. So you've got this huge gulf in expectations, and that is a wonderful time for thoughtful investors, active managers. Active's been out of favor, but active managers really to find fantastic opportunities. And this is, I think, probably the most extreme I've seen it since the turn of the century. So that's really exciting. Then on the risk side, the risk is always the same. And the risk is that in an uncertain world, that we are missing something. That's what sort of keeps me up at night, that there's a scenario that I'm not thinking about, particularly a scenario that acts as a fault line through market, something that connects things together that I'm missing. So that's what I'm constantly worrying about, but what I'm excited about is all the opportunities we see around the world.
Excellent, very succinct. This is why we have less me and more Dan. Excellent, good start. Drilling down then to individual investments, what are you, your team, the good ship Morningstar, what do you look for most in an individual investment? What do you see as red flags?
Okay, so it's always two things. The first is quality. And we define that quality in the same way that Warren Buffett does, which is that we like businesses with moats. And what we mean by that is that there's something about that business that protects its ability to deliver returns on capital far into the future. And that could be a brand, that could be the way that it acts as part of a network, it could be the way it controls costs. There's lots of different brand sources, or moat sources I should say, but we like businesses with a moat. And so if you have a business with a moat, then you can pay up for the share price and still get a decent return. If a business doesn't have a moat, or even if businesses do have moats, we also love value. We love companies that are trading below a reasonable expectation of what they're really worth. So if you can have both, you can have high quality and a lot of value, that's ideal. We're seeing a few instances of that at the moment, but normally you have to choose. And so we spend some time thinking more about quality businesses which aren't as cheap as we'd like them to be, or very low cost businesses that aren't as high quality as we'd want them to be. So it's always a compromise, but if you can find the sweet spot, then that is absolutely ideal. So that's what we look for. In terms of red flags, then for us it's really investments that don't deliver a cash flow. And that's where businesses tend to be driven by sentiment, not just businesses, but assets as well. People get very excited about cryptocurrency, doesn't have a cash flow, or other assets that don't have a cash flow. So that's one red flag. High fees are another really big red flag, because if you're leaking your capital out through costs all the time, then that's a red flag. So if you can keep those two things in mind, so things that don't deliver a cash flow, so can't be valued properly, or investments that cost you too much to own, then those are the big red flags.
Okay, well, I'm not leading on to this question just because you mentioned cash flow and how expensive things might be, but to what degree do you think professional investors should be thinking beyond more traditional investments, and towards what? I'll give you a free hit.
Yeah, well, that's the fun thing, because we've been around the industry for roughly the same amount of time, and what we both know is that things that were considered alternatives when we started our careers are now very mainstream. And the things that are now seen as alternatives were completely unheard of when we started. So everything that is now a traditional investment was once an alternative, really, apart from, let's say, government bonds maybe, and cash deposits. So given that, what we know is that there'll always be these new alternatives, and they normally emerge into the market because they provide some benefit to investors. So the most obvious one at the moment is the convergence of private assets and public markets. And so we're increasingly seeing private assets in the hands of investors who wouldn't have been able to access them even a few years ago, and certainly not 5-10 years ago. So that is a great innovation because it's allowing investors like you and me access to private companies, often very fast growing, high quality businesses that are just staying private longer than they used to in the past. So that's a great thing. But whenever you get a new innovation, there's always traps as well. So that could be in poor structures that don't really take into account the liquidity issues, could be in a lack of understanding amongst investors, could be bad actors in some of these emerging industries. We've seen them before.
Yeah, but we're a new business. We don't mention names. Okay? We're just starting out.
But we know, after every boom, there's always a few bad actors that emerge, and that's why it's so important that investors do their homework. That's why we see our role as trying to help people navigate these new investments and access these opportunities while trying to avoid some of the traps for the unwary.
Very good. Thank you for that. Helping clients navigate traps, I suppose that brings me neatly to communication, client comms. What drives your approach to client comms? And if I'm going to throw in an extra question, I was talking about, should you as professional investors aim to attract the right type of client, or perhaps maybe the right ways, should you be developing the right client who understands what they're getting involved with and therefore they won't bail out at the wrong time, that sort of thing?
Well, yes, I would say it's our responsibility to make sure that people become the right type of client. So you and I know that everyone has these cognitive biases, and the most prevalent is that we're naturally inclined to buy high and sell low, that we tend to make terrible decisions unless we're coached, and certainly in the heat of the moment. And so part of the job of any wealth manager, advisor, professional investor is to try and help that client stay on the journey. They might be able to coach them from being someone that habitually makes terrible decisions into someone who's a very, very competent investor and moving along towards their goals. So I don't think it's about finding the right client. It's about creating the right client by helping them understand their goals, giving them a good plan, showing them how they can get there, and using the basic behavioral science tools that have all emerged over the last decade or so to help clients along that journey. So again, when it comes to communications then, the behavioural insights part is really important because so often we communicate as an industry in a way that's not helpful to people. So one of the things that we do most prominently when we communicate with clients is tell them what the short-term returns have been. So of course that does exactly what we don't want it to do. It encourages people to buy high and sell low because when things have gone up, they want to buy them. When they come down, they want to sell them. So thinking about all of our communications through that behavioural science lens is really important. Another thing that people do is write market commentary that very confidently predicts the short-term future or ascribes market movements to a single cause. All of these things create narratives in the minds of investors that can create surprises further down the line and lead to people's undoing. So I think we always start from the perspective of how do we help investors make good decisions? We're fortunate we have a behavioural science team within Morningstar that kind of helps us do that, but nevertheless, anybody, I think, can start from that perspective of when I'm communicating with clients, how is my focus helping them make good decisions rather than showing them how clever I am or how well we've done in the recent past?
Nicely communicated, well played, thank you for that. More personal question now. What was your path into investment and in the alternative universe? If you hadn't taken it, what do you think you'd be doing now?
Well, I'm so glad. I think this podcast is about an hour and a half. So I can tell the story in full.
Kick back, press pause, make a cup of tea, come back.
Buckle up. Anyway, no. So the short version is that I was planning to go into the investing world. I've always been fascinated by the idea of being able to own parts of companies that we see around us. It's incredible, really. So that was always the plan, and I wanted to go and study economics. And I was studying economics before really the advent of behavioural science. And economics at that point was grounded on the idea of the rational person, or those days the rational man, which doesn't exist. So I spent all my time at A-level economics learning theories and then learning why they didn't work, which I felt was pointless. And so instead of studying that for 3 years, I decided to follow my great passion of theology. I went and did that instead. And then weirdly, I came out of university in the mid-90s to discover that all the big investment banks and investment management houses didn't want to hire theology graduates, which was shocking, really. But anyway, so from that, I was really fortunate. I ended up getting a job as a pension administrator. I'm a dreadful administrator, but in that role I met financial advisors, and I loved the work that they did helping investors. And so that moved me into initially financial advice, and then closer to investment research and investment management, and where I've ended up today. So it was a long and winding road, but I think if I wasn't doing this, I think it's most likely that I'd have ended up in the ministry, in full-time ministry. I've always expected that I would end up in the ministry at some point. I never actually felt called to do it, and so I believe the calling's really important, and so I haven't done it. And I've ended up where I am, but that's where I'd be if I wasn't in investing today.
Theology presumably would have helped in sort of early 2000, then 2008, 2009. A little divine intervention perhaps maybe would have...
Well, I think so. Oh, the thing is, I mean, you're right. I think that one of the benefits of studying theology, and philosophy would be the same, and some other academic subjects probably, but is an understanding that you are dealing with the infinite and trying to squash the infinite into a finite brain. And it doesn't work. And so you're always having to make compromises and deciding where the gaps in your arguments are going to be. And in a slightly obtuse way, investment's a bit similar. Investment is functionally infinite. There's always more you can do, there's always more you can think about. And so to be able to actually act as an investor, you have to decide what you're going to know and what has to be unknown, and to try and decide where those gaps in your knowledge are going to be. So I would argue in some small way it helped me, but it was also a fantastic 3 year study.
Very good. I was just thinking, for most investors, the religion would come in as, oh God, and the philosophy of, oh well. And I suppose maybe that's it. And it leads very neatly. Yes. The next question is, what's the biggest investment mistake you're prepared to admit to, and what, if anything, did you learn from it?
Oh, I made tons.
Yeah, I'll give you one. Again, this is just the 2 or 3 hour podcast.
Yeah. So you kindly sort of prompted me on this question beforehand. So I've been giving it some thought, and most of the investment mistakes I've made have really been sins of omission, going back to my theology, rather than sins of commission. So I've tended to miss out on things that have gone from being quite expensive to very expensive, and missed out on the gains there, and that's frustrating. But I've tended to avoid most things that started off very expensive and became very, very cheap, or lost money entirely. So I'm naturally more cautious, more risk averse, more pessimistic when thinking about investing. And so the biggest mistake that I made was believing that investing was an individual sport, something that you could do on your own, just using your own thought, your own learning, your own understanding, because that just embeds those biases and increased the number of times I made that mistake. And what I've come to realize in my latter years is that actually investing is a team sport, that you've got to have other people around you with diverse perspectives who are helping you overcome your own biases. So I would characterize investing as much more like a rugby team than a tennis match. It's about having people with lots of different skills and different abilities and different biases all together working as a team, and that'll deliver much better outcomes. So if I'd learned that 20 years ago, I think I'd made far fewer mistakes.
Well, other people don't have to. You make mistakes, no one else has to. Brilliant. Random question. See how you answer. Outside of work, what's the strangest thing you've ever seen or done?
Well, there's been a few. But again, we're back to things I'm prepared to admit to.
Yes, exactly.
So I think one of the strangest experiences I've ever had was I was part of a rock gospel choir when I was in university, and we ended up booking an incredible venue for a concert, the Astoria theatre on Tottenham Court Road. If you ever went there, it closed down sadly in 2009.
Because of your concert?
Yes, mainly because of the concert. It was such a disaster. So we played the Astoria, and I think we played there the week after Jamiroquai, and about the same time as in Spiral Carpets, and all these incredible bands. And we booked this venue, being very optimistic about the crowds we'd be able to bring in, and ticketed and fly and all that sort of thing. And we completely failed in that endeavour. The crowd was really quite small. It ended up, the organisers, including me, sort of pocketed the excess cost. And so it cost me some money, which as a student kind of felt a lot at the time. But of course I can now look back and go, oh wow, I have no musical ability and I played the Astoria, which is very cool. And you realise, I think through that some of these experiences that maybe feel very expensive or feel very risky actually build into just really wonderful memories as you get further on in life.
Very philosophical. Excellent. I've got two more questions. One is worky, one is not. But on the worky side or the investment side, what's your best and worst case scenarios for the future of wealth in the UK?
So the best case scenario is that we get closer to the Australian system where workplace pensions become a much bigger part of everyone's savings, and that creates capital that then wealth advisors, financial advisors, investment managers can then use that capital to help people both reach their goals but also support all of the investment projects we know desperately require new capital in the UK. And so by creating that investing culture, we've seen that, as I say, in Australia, by recreating it here, I think we could have a transformative impact on people's lives, but also on the economy and investment opportunities as well. So I think that's the best case scenario. We've seen some moves in that direction. There needs to be a lot more, but that is the upside. I think the downside is that the industry becomes very small and insular because the costs of running wealth businesses are quite high. The number of clients that people can deal with shrink. And in that scenario, the industry is left looking after a small number of wealthy people and obviously doing a very good job of that, but not having the transformative effect on society it could have if we were able to broaden out the market to a much greater number of people and help more people reach their goals.
Cool, thank you. Last question, we call this choice words because choosing is slightly what you do for a living, and that was the crowbarring the best pun I could get in at the time. But we're looking for choices from personal sort of recommendations. One of them would be ideally a book. One can be a free choice, whether it's a podcast or a restaurant or best rock gospel experience of the last 30 years.
Yeah, I got all of that.
It's got YouTube, is it somewhere? But what can you pick?
Do you know, that's really interesting because I was going to go for two books.
Yeah.
So the first book is The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks. And this is a book about investing it was the first book that Marks wrote. He's just an incredible investor and very, very wise, but also a brilliant communicator. And this is the first book that we encourage new graduates who join our team to read. Everyone's read the book in the team. It's a really wonderful way to conceptualize investing and a good foundation to build from. But as you've given me more choice, I'm actually not going to go for my second book.
Okay.
And what I'm going to say is...
Well, you can do that second book and then have a...
Okay, let's do second book. So the second book is Edward Hess, Learn or Die, which is all about creating an ever-learning culture. And really, that's the heart of where we want everyone in the team and the business to be, always thinking about how do we improve, how do we get better, how to incrementally we deliver more. So again, wonderful, wonderful book, Learn or Die, Edward Hess. So that would be the second book. But as you give me experiences, then I've got to say that one of my favourite things to do if you're in the city at 5 o'clock on a weekday is go to Evensong at St. Paul's. It is the most marvellous thing. Whether you are someone who prays or someone who doesn't, it is the most wonderful wonderful choral experience. If you get there early enough, you can go and sit in the choir. So it's really quite an intimate venue, listening to these wonderful choristers and having just a contemplative 45 minutes. So as an experience, I don't think that can be beaten.
Yeah, so well, that's the whole point of that question, is to find something. Yeah, I mean, it can be communicated with gusto and enthusiasm, which, as you know, is rarely something you get from me, but it's nice that you're doubling up on your side. Dan, great choices, great conversation. Thank you so much for talking to us today. That's brilliant.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted.
And thank you all, he says optimistically, for watching. Please do look out for further Choice Words videos in this series.